thank you for coming in person. It's always a great opportunity to network with our fellow companies in the industry. And today we are live on Zoom. So we want to welcome our participants that are online, and then also welcome everyone for coming in person. Our last in-person meeting was in December of 2019, and before COVID. And at that point, we had on average 75 to 95 members show up in person. So we were curious how today would turn out. I think that we used to, in the middle, have a networking session. We're excited. DU has the collaboratory, and that was a great opportunity for us to learn how to do a hybrid meeting together. But also, we're excited that you're bringing us in to participate. So,
and you guys are one of our first industry events in this space. The construction was done in June. Of course, the technology got done Friday at 4. So, so we're dialing things in. Thank you guys for your patience and grace. I've got a bunch of students here that are here to help out for extra credit. So I bought their love, but also they're here to network with you guys. And they're all future leaders of the industry. They're interested in what's going on in the electrification here in Colorado, and they're looking for jobs. So please introduce yourselves. Make sure they introduce themselves to you. I just want to welcome you all to this event.
And it's part of the goal of to bring business in.
What's the purpose? The purpose of this is to connect academia and industry in ways we've never done before. So having you guys come in, interact with students, but also the fact that we can broadcast from this space, utilize our multiple screens of technology, our high flex classroom. So different events, either live or in person. That's what we're trying to do with this space. We're running research projects, classes, outreach out of this room. It's a pretty awesome space, actually. We're pretty excited to be here.
So that is an opportunity for our members. If you want to have a training, do a podcast, they overlay. They have
well, this is Liquid Galaxy, and it's Google Earth, and I can give, I don't know if we have time today, but we can overlay data on top of Google Earth, cyberstock properties like we've never done before. We can do collaborative meetings with the Bluescape wall. Just a lot of opportunities. So,
all right.
Thank you, Patricia.
Yeah, we're excited to be here. I'm going to move forward in the agenda. And just as a reminder, EBC, we are a trade association for energy efficiency businesses, companies, and what we call industry stakeholders. And we have a lot of action groups that are working on rebates right now. We're in the second half of the audit. But the design of today's meeting is focused on the conference and what's happening in the market that impacts your business and where you seem to be to get ahead of it, and how to work with builders, understanding the workforce, what's happening, how to plug in, as well as how do you make a difference in changing and adding new votes in Excel. Energy is going through that process right now. So we have a combination of speakers that are going to be in front, and we also have our speakers that are going to be projected online today. So with that, let's get started. So our first speaker today is Michael Gifford from the association, actually Associated General Contractors. I noticed that. And he's going to tell a little bit about himself, and then also dive into what's workforce. Not, we know that we need more, but what's happening that you probably get involved with as well. Find employee turnover and what's going on today. So with that, come on.
Congratulations to your group. You're very focused on a proposition that I think is pointed directly at the future. So congratulations for that. For those of you on Zoom, what you are missing the excellent breakfast burritos this morning. Bacon's over here too, but I just wanted to grab one so after I speak, I make sure that congratulations to DU on this great space, and it's great to see Barbara Jackson's name out on the door coming in as well. So, what Patricia asked me to talk about, and I guess I'm not gonna see a copy of my slides behind, so good thing I brought notes here, that's good. Unless the technology changes there, and I know Eric can do that if he wants to. The, construction employment outlook. But before we did that, I just wanted to go to the next slide and quickly tell you that, like your trade association, oh look, there it is. Like your trade association, AGC is a trade association of commercial, general, and specialty contractors, 680 total in Colorado. It is for commercial building. We have another AGC chapter in the state for highways. That's called the Colorado Contractors Association. We're like sister and brother. We're both part of AGC America, which is 89 chapters across the country and 20,000 construction groups. And we focus on, until recently, 3 things, and we added a 4th goal, so advocacy, and that pretty much makes sense as a reason that we exist and why I dress like this and not the Capitol most of the time. We'll talk about that later. Membership engagement, which includes a heavy diet of education and training and networking. Workforce development, our biggest area. We deliver that to our Construction Education Foundation. We'll talk about that in a moment. And we do full U.S. Department of Labor apprenticeships in 6 crafts. We do adult pre-apprenticeship monthly. That says we have 20 high school construction programs and growing, but we're actually up to 47. We'll talk about that more in a moment. And our latest goal, culture of care, covers diversity and inclusion, as well as well-being and mental health and addiction services. And that's a growing part of our association, because that's what's going on out in society. Glad to talk about that maybe another time, or you can find out more about that by going to the AGC website. So I said that we do, the next slide, please, deliver many of our workforce programs through our Construction Education Foundation. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but I want to let you know that this very hard-working portal exists in this market. You can get there either by typing in www.sepcolorado.org or philcolorado.com. Our organization is the Construction Education Foundation. And I will tell you that a couple key points that you see, I captured these scrolling numbers at just the right moment to put this slide in. Jobs to add by 2027. I'm going to end that at the bottom line of my presentation this morning. So 45,000 is right. So we know it's a large challenge that we have ahead of us. So just know that that's a hardworking portal. It has thousands and thousands of potential employees and jobs just in the job board, student internships, students graduating with hiring fairs, and it lists all of the 47 high schools that we're in, and we're going to talk about that now on the next slide. So knowing that there was a workforce challenge, we went out and formed, we looked at the size of the challenge and ended up saying, if the residential and the commercial doesn't act together, we're not going to solve the problem. I have a letter on my desk from 1955, one of our prominent members writing the national president of AGC saying, we have got to address the workforce problem. So we've been at this for a while. So our idea was to partner with the Home Builders Association, use their national curriculum called the Home Builders Institute, which isn't just carpentry. It's got 11 modules in there, including all the MEP trades. And we went to the state and we got state law change that compelled the high schools to talk to us and reinsert shop back into the high school. In this case, we call it construction career technical education. That's the modern policy word for that. But we'll still refer to the shop or industrial arts or manual arts. Me myself. We've got 2,000 students in those 47 high schools, and that is a great place for you to engage. It's not a closed system. You don't even have to be an AGC member per se. It would be an advantage to do so, but You can engage, and I'll tell you, many of these 2,000 students, the 500 that graduated this year, they went to work for a company that had already been to the classes as a guest lecturer, met some students, and that was the easiest path for them to go with that company. And many of those are MEP contractors that are snapping up those students, by the way. And then we do construction careers now. And I'll just tell you, in there, those 47 schools, the HBA is handling about half, we're handling about half. We're spending more north of $1 million a year, $30,000 per school on 20 schools plus 5 staff members. We really need 10 staff members, so we're writing a grant to try to get some more help. But at 100K a staff member, that's 1.1 million we're spending just on the schools that we're doing, and the HBA is spending the same on their side. Joint foundation, a 501c3 called Careers in Construction Colorado, just to deliver this product to the marketplace. And we have the rights to use the HBI curriculum, which is the National Association of Home Builders curriculum, to deliver that within the state. Construction careers now is monthly adult pre-apprenticeship. We've done that since 2016 every month. And despite all that effort, we can only verify 1,000 new employees into the industry. So that's a lot of in the mud, slogging every month, getting people that have another job. And they say, I want something better in my life. My car broke down, baby got married, want to make more than minimum wage. I'll go to this free class for a month at night. And then I'm having fair the last night and right into a job that doubles their monthly for their hourly wage. Plus they've got benefits and then they're learning on the job. Not the most productive route because they're not very trained on their first day. So a lot of training by the employer. Next slide, please. So what Patricia asked me about was kind of the employment outlook. So I just some summary thoughts. We were as low as 104,000 employees in 2011. We got to 100,600 in January of 2020. And now we've actually exceeded that and we're at 185,000 in July of 2022. But the need as projected by CDLE in 2027, which is not very far away, is 220,000 employees. And that's all in. That's infrastructure, that's housing, and that's commercial. All in. Anyone who has coded construction by the state and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Question?
We're that many jobs short.
Yes. And I'll make the case for that in a moment that I think their number is correct. Commercial construction starts. So as I conceptually think about employment, it's driven by project demand. How many homes do we want to build? How many roads do we want to build? How many hospitals, offices, and hotels do we want to build? Okay, so commercial construction is the part I know. So that would be everything other than single family homes. So I'm talking apartments, multifamily, and commercial, as well as infrastructure. I know that very well. And that's going to bounce along the top for the next few years. So commercial is going to bounce along the top. And we're going to look at some numbers that breaks that down in just a moment. So, and then the two big things is going to be how do we attract employees and how do we deal with materials, cost, delivery shortages. So let's dive into that a little bit more with the next slide. This just shows Colorado construction employment and gives you a picture of the history. By the way, all these slides are fine to send to the attendees, but you can see the history. When I arrived in 2007, it was, I think, around 170,000 employees, and Denver Metro was building 30,000 housing units that year. It was right before the bust of the bubble. And look at how far that drop was. That was a 40% drop in 4 years. That's like Mary Jane, drunken Frenchman, a double black diamond mogul run. That's a steep drop. Okay, and then you see the rise there, and I would make the case that I'm not sure exactly how we got to 185,000. And a little bit of a spoiler alert, I think we got to 185,000 because we hired a lot of unskilled, untrained people that aren't that productive in our businesses. Let's just be honest. And that number would be 200,000 today if we could find another 15,000 of those unproductive beginning workers that we have to train. We're not hiring. And so we're building the amount of building we're doing through overtime, Saturday, and other mechanization and other productivity, but we're pulling out all the stops. We really probably need another 15,000 employees for everyone to have a work-life balance and work a normal 40-hour schedule. Next slide, please. So total construction starts, you can see that there. The 2022 is half a year. So it's projected to actually exceed the year before in dollars. So that's the bounce along the top. That's all in residential, commercial, and infrastructure. Next slide, please. As I break this down, so this is residential, and you can see the breathtaking increase over the last 3 years in the residential side. And that's predicted to at least match. It was predicted to match this year what it did last year. It may tail off a little bit with the rise in interest rates, but certainly long term not predicted to fall back. So that's the residential outlook. And again, you'll be provided with these slides after. Let's go to the next slide, please. Commercial construction starts. We're not the largest market. For example, Dallas is about 3.5 times our size of Denver, but on the state, that's predicted to exceed, once you double that number, what we did last year. So still a very strong commercial market. Next slide, please. And then a lot of talk about infrastructure. Infrastructure is going to far exceed what we've done in the last 3 years. We've got the federal money coming in from 2 different federal bills. We've got Senate Bill 260 from 2021, which is state funding. So we're going to do a lot of infrastructure, not just roads and bridges, but water, sewer, etc. So that's kind of the outlook. And then if you look at the next slide on a regional basis, you can see Denver is up for commercial and residential. You can see Fort Collins is up. Colorado Springs is down. I think Colorado Springs just had a very good run for the last 3 years with the City for Champions, those big 4 projects. And so the numbers are down from an unnatural high. So obviously Colorado Springs outlook is very strong. And at some point, population wise, will take over Denver as the largest city or county in the state. So that's kind of the construction outlook. And then if we try to peer ahead, not look in the rearview mirror, but in the windshield, what do we see? That'd be the next slide. We can look at what in our world, we look at what the architects are designing, what they're drawing on the commercial side. And you see Architectural Billings Index, anything above that yellow line means they're getting hired to design more projects. You see the drop in the pandemic, but then you see it's been above the yellow line since then. And currently, if you go to the next slide, we're at 53.2 for billings and 52.2 for design contracts. So architects are still getting busier and busier and busier. Now, a lot of that is developers repricing and repricing and repricing because they're trying to get things within budget. And so you are repricing over and over and over, right, as part of that. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's a better problem to have than that 2010 at the bottom of that dip where we all were issuing pink slips. So that tells us that the market is still wanting to do an increasing amount of projects, not less. Next slide, please. So in summary on this, what's driving construction growth? It's population growth, and we're going to dive into that in a second. Net in-migration, corporate relocation, deferred infrastructure demand, and deferred housing demand. And so all of those point long-term to that 220,000 number. CDLE didn't come up with that in a vacuum. It's a real number. So let's go to the population to kind of add that in. So net in-migration is simply how many people are moving in versus how many people are moving out. Now there's another one over here, births over deaths, and I kind of stripped that out. Maybe as if we have more births, we'll need a certain amount of more housing. But in the short term, what I found is net migration is the number that we watch that drives the demand, certainly for commercial construction. And you can see that Colorado's had a history of more people moving in than moving out. And the biggest demographic within those blue lines is the 25 to 34-year-olds. And it's a chicken and the egg there where the companies, mostly from San Francisco, Seattle, New York, and Chicago, they desire those 25 to 34-year-olds. And we are the second most educated state in the country. So the companies are coming here, and then when they find out there's not enough people, it attracts more people to move here for the jobs, which attracts more companies, which attracts more people. And I see the companies because I'm on the Metro Denver EDC Executive Committee, and I see the prospects that come in, and we actively recruit those prospects to the state for more commercial construction to occur. And they want to come here because educated 25 to 34-year-old base, and to the extent they need to recruit, it's easy to recruit to the mountains. They're right, they're right outside the window here. Housing prices notwithstanding going up, what are the other choices for these young people? LA, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Austin, those are all expensive too. So the way I look at it is we don't need to be perfect. We just need to be less expensive than some of the alternatives. And that's where we are. We're the most expensive that's not near the ocean on either coast. Denver now is, but yeah, look at these migration numbers. So as those move up, one of the pieces that's predicted to refill, I talked to the state demographer yesterday, is international migration back in. That really shut down during the pandemic. But so these are highly educated individuals coming for highly paid jobs, and that's going to fill part of that. And people are starting to move around again. So in-migration is the key. I watch that. As long as that's happening, we're going to need to build more. Next slide, please. So, and you kind of look at this again, a lot of local governments have COVID funding. They're spending it on Energize Denver and grant programs to help you out, for example. You see climate change will be on the ballot in Denver in November, a Tabor question: can the city keep all of the quarter-cent sales tax for the climate change, because it's just come in faster than their projections? So they need the Denver voters' permission to keep the excess revenue and spend it all. Same with the homeless quarter-cent sales tax. The cities and the counties have a large amount of funds they haven't even figured out how to spend yet. You've got the state 5.4 billion in infrastructure. You've got the federal IJA, which they've now changed to BIL. I can't tell you exactly why, but they've changed the name. And then the new Inflation Reduction Act, all of that money coming in on the infrastructure side. Next slide, please. One area that I predict is going to tail off in funding is K through 12. The best grant program was at 300 million per year, and that was helping local school districts add at the margin to their bond issues and build schools, and it's now reduced to 100 million a year. That's because the bonding capacity has been reached, the debt service limit. And that base funding is coming from marijuana excise tax, and that tax is going down because other states are getting into the retail marijuana business, cutting into our market. So that's one area that I think is going to lessen, but there's going to be plenty of construction to go around. But to the extent you do a lot of school work, it may turn more to performance contracting and those kind of things versus brand new builds of schools. So more maintenance work. So then just a few advocacy thoughts, which is really my my day job on the next slide. Voter makeup, 29% D, 26% R. It's now actually 25% R. R's are aging, and I hate to say it, dying off, and their base is not growing. Most of the young people moving in are D's or unaffiliated that are traditionally broken, 2/3 D. So Colorado will continue to trend blue. More regulations at the state and local level. That's more as an employer, human resource type rules. You've seen a lot of those changes. More green. This is exactly what you're trying to meet. Those policies are going to accelerate, not slow down. And we're going to need more workforce, but this blue trend is supportive of workforce programs. So there's going to be more grants like the 450,000 you have that you're working with now. You're going to see more of that to go along with the more green. So that's kind of my advocacy thoughts that all go into construction outlook. So then in total, the construction outlook, next slide, please, is for continued strong demand in all sectors, infrastructure, commercial, and residential. Notwithstanding residential has a short-term shift of a preference to rent versus buy with the interest rates going up. I kind of thought of it conceptually. the residential buyer didn't just take their foot off the gas, but they slammed it on the brake in short term. When interest rates double, they're 6%. When I got out of college, interest rates were close to 20%. So I date myself. It still sounds like cheap money to me, but it feels like expensive money to some. So I think that this price increases, what I'm seeing is a record amount more than normal of value engineering, re-estimating pricing, developer starts and stops. Some people call it free con, where you're just pricing over and over and over at the trade contractor level. Watch that. Watch your estimating departments, because they're really working overtime. And then maybe a global recession. So we're at AGC, one of our scenarios is a 10 to 20% slowdown for next year, even with all that demand, but that'll be very short as it just kind of that slack works through the system. Let's get to the what's next. Next slide, please. The green building, I talked about that, watching state and local public policy. I'm one of the 18 appointed members to the Building Performance Standards Task Force. We just finished our 12 months of work yesterday and published that report. That's 9,000 buildings in the state, 50,000 square feet or more. And in May of 2023, those rules will be published. Those buildings are reporting now, but then by May of 2023, they're going to have to meet a site EUI target by normalized for building types and for occupancy and weather. And the fines will be significant. Those rules will be developed between now and next May. And so there's 9,000 buildings out there that are going to have a whole lot of work to do to meet the state targets, which are basically 7% greenhouse gas reduction by 2026 and 20% reduction by 2030. I want to say this in a fair way, but it's so far not quite as a carrot and a stick as Energized Denver is. It's more of the stick, and we don't necessarily see the carrot yet. So maybe that'll come along over time, and that's where some of this more green policy could come in. But what about the workforce? Because I think about that, all the work that you will do at the same time, a company like Excel is going to be wanting to widen the distribution system from the power plant to the buildings to be able to handle all the load that you're going to build in, and who's going to do that while the highways are building and the housing is building and the water and sewer. Back to the 220,000 employees. Now apprenticeship is a big deal. That blue wave that I talked about, or that trending blue, is very much favoring the unions, but they can't do it in a blatant way. I mean, that's their base is labor. So they're doing it through apprenticeship regulations. So that's something to watch. Last year, you saw a bill that would have told Dora that electrical ratios have to be 1-to-1. And they're not now. So those are the types of things. I'm one of 10 individuals appointed by the governor and the director of Department of Labor to the State Apprenticeship Council. So the state wants to take over apprenticeships from the federal government to regulate that in a more direct way. Read that as more regulations on your business. So that's something to watch. There'll also be a lot more money for apprenticeships, and then federal policy. President Biden said he would be the most union-friendly president ever. So far, he is proving that. That's not a negative statement, it's a factual statement. And so as we see the Inflation Reduction Act, there's all sorts of new project labor agreement regulations attached to all of those federal dollars, including some projects that you could work on that are federal dollars. And those PLA requirements are even attached now to tax credits. So developers haven't, I think, completely digested that. So just be watching on every job you do, what's attached to this new Buy American, new PLA requirements, a lot of those kind of things. And then in the foundation, we are actually intentionally ending our monthly pre-apprenticeship program because it is producing an average age of a 30-year-old with zero construction experience, 4 weeks of training, and then you have to start from zero. And instead we're saying, to get to that 220,000, we have to fix the system. So we're going all in on a new, we're taking a 27,000 square foot facility. We have 11 classrooms, 7 labs, and we're creating 3 new 2-year apprenticeship programs. So that when those high school students come out, they can go right into that apprenticeship program, earn their Associate of Applied Science from one of the community colleges in the state, and finish their 2-year apprenticeship in either rough or interior carpentry, and then a superintendent program is the third one. We already have great apprenticeship programs for electrical and mechanical, so we're not trying to solve that. And then we're also starting a sustainable building for high school students. It's the 11th module in that Home Builders Institute national curriculum. And that will be broadcast out of our facility to those 47 high schools. But we'd love to partner with what you're doing, because I think not only the more the merrier, but to hit that 220,000 number, it's going to have to be an all-in strategy. So the bottom line is we're at, next slide, please. We're at 185,000 today. We need to get to 220,000. So that's a 35,000 gap. But remember, the baby boomers are retiring every day. So I really say double that. The gross number is 70 to get to the net of 35. And to do that, we're going to have to work twice as hard, and we're going to have to continue to add people that are unskilled and train them on the job. Same time, we think that to solve this problem long-term, we've got to go that route with the apprenticeships, and that's why we're kind of switching to the high school system versus just the adult career apprenticeship. That's where we're going to focus in the future, and we're glad to partner with you on any of that. And with that, glad to answer any questions, but there's the challenge we're going to be working under for the next few years.
Okay.
Well, I got the letter from 1955, so that's
Exactly.
that's a lot of years later. I think to some extent, our members remember kind of a good old days, if they do, in the 70s and 80s when they had shop in their high school. And that's probably part of the reason we're heading back to that as a solution. If we can finally get several hundred high schools in the state with a construction shop program, that could be a systematic thing where we can get our property tax dollars that we all pay to start working for us again. So that's our strategy.
Great. Take one or two questions before we move forward. We're gonna need to stay on time, so any questions? Great,
Thank you.
awesome.
Thanks.
Great to hear where we're going, because I think we want to hear what your needs are, what your challenges are, and workforce and labor turnover is always high, the top thing on the list. So to add to that, I also want to mention that in the back here, we have one of our board members, Brian, from ICAST, and we're partnering with another organization called Julius. And Michael mentioned that we have a grant from the city of Denver. And so specifically for EEBC members, we've announced it quite a bit, but we haven't had any companies sign up and say, yes, I want to get in the pipeline. I want to receive grads from getting an orientation course. There's two parts. There's an orientation in insulation, air sealing, lighting, and in heat pumps, HVAC. And you can join, and what we'd like to do is talk to your upper management who makes the decision to say, yes, we want to work with you to get employees that have some orientation and industry. And then you can also upskill existing employees. And if you're looking for heat pump specific techs to get fully certified, that is being offered, and it's a scholarship. All members of the EEBC have first right of refusal to the grads to interview them and decide to hire them. And then you can also add the training into your onboarding when you hire someone. So you have a couple different options to get more, not necessarily warm bodies, but who are interested and probably going to better retention to stay in the industry. And then they can take building science principles as well as in energy efficiency installation course. They can get BPI certified and get a scholarship for free. So there's a flyer on the back table. Sign up, talk to Ryan, and get your company involved. The next question is, okay, we're talking about the breadth and depth of how many employees we need and how many we're short. So what are we doing about it? One of it is starting a workforce program for our members specifically to get you new employees and upskill your existing employees. But then also, what are the builders who are doing high performance building? We're talking about where we're going with net zero, electrification, passive homes, all the things that are happening right now. EBC is made up of the companies are typically, I would call you guys the innovators and the first adopters, that are on the cutting edge of that. And yet at the same time, we have really our origination started as doing gas high efficiency rebates, gas furnaces, insulation, air sealing. And so we have that how do we transition and help our members with your business? So what we wanted to do is talk to a couple of the, I call them legacy high performance builders in Colorado, and they are McStain. So Rick, hey, come on down. We're gonna chat. So McStain neighborhood, Rick Lambert, you want to say a little bit about yourself, and then we'll introduce Bill next.
Sure. Rick Lambert, I'm with McStain Neighborhoods. Vice President of Operations there. I oversee all of our construction, design, bidding processes. So, we've been a high performance builder here in the state for, 60 years. One of the first Energy Star builders. We've been building the zero energy ready home standard for the last 4 or 5. And, one of the builders in the state that are just trying to push the envelope. We're working on our first all electric home currently up in Erie, Colorado. And just want to continue to be advocates for more efficient building, healthier building, trying to push the envelope there here in the industry.
Awesome. And then also Bill, you're on the screen, we'll get you queued up. So Bill Rectanis from Thrive Home Builders is the VP there of operations, or excuse me, he's actually the chief officer of operations. And do you want to give us a little bit of your background?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
There you are. Great. Yes.
All right. Yeah, so Thrive Home Builders, very much like McStain Neighborhoods. We're a high performance home builder, about mid-sized in the market here. Been building for about 30 years and been pushing the envelope from day one, trying to really stay ahead of the energy efficiency, healthy home, zero energy. And now we're really focused on carbon and how do we figure out how to be a zero carbon builder? There's a lot of pressure from municipalities to go down that pathway through zero energy. And I think our goal is to try and figure out if there are other ways to get there that are more cost effective, to try and help stay ahead of the code and figure out the best way to help the municipalities reach their goals over time in a manner that works well for the industry and the business. And so that's been our focus over the last few years. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. It's great to hear. They're super progressive, counting carbon. We hear about it, but we really don't know what it means yet. What that looks like. You guys are actually figuring out, I think. And we want to talk about it because we want to talk about the contractors and what you're looking for when you go to higher performance building. Contractors and what changes in how you do that. But I just think it's interesting that there are 6 companies, I think, that you guys are looking at that provide software to count carbon in all the embodied carbon in the concrete, the number of nails that you're using, and you're adding that up and coming up with a total score. Can you give us a little more explanation on it?
Yeah, sure. It's a really daunting task, actually, because the residential building industry and the residential products seem to be, at least from our perspective, a little further behind than the commercial industry on understanding the embodied carbon of their materials. Certainly, we're way behind Europe and Asia in that. We actually partnered with DU out at the International Builder Show last year and had a large group of students go around the show floor and ask vendors there if they had an EPD, an Environmental Product Declaration, which is the document that you use to basically figure out the embodied carbon within the products they produce. And it was next to none. I think we maybe found 2 or 3 out of the entire show floor that knew what we were talking about and had it available. And so right now we're looking at different calculators that have taken information from the commercial industry, averages from Europe and Asia, and really tried to build calculators to help builders once you build your house in BIM, get your bill of materials, your product list, to be able to enter this into their system and output what your carbon footprint is for your product for the whole home once it's put together. Once again, we're working with DU on this. Eric's students have been great in going out and looking at all these different softwares to try and figure out which one's the best. And it's kind of step one in figuring out the process and trying to find out, how accurate can we be, how comfortable we are with the numbers, and then taking those numbers and figuring out how to buy carbon offsets. And that's another step. Where do you go get a good carbon offset? It's one thing to go buy a carbon offset from a tree farm in Malaysia that's registered at the UN, but wouldn't it be great to figure out local carbon offsets that are making an impact here in our local state and local municipalities that we could use to offset the carbon footprint of our homes? The next part of that's operational carbon, which we're kind of talking about today, and that's the mission for all electric and getting all the fuel out of the homes for its operation and really bringing its operational carbon down to zero, which I think we're much closer at.
Awesome. So realize that's way on the cutting edge, or right way over here. And we have builders that are going to net zero and electrification. And we have Energy Star that's been around for a while. And then we have higher codes that are coming in 2018, 2021. And then we have legislation as well. Now, many of the jurisdictions, we have over 300 of them in Colorado. When they make the next code change, there's legislation passed this in 2022. It says that the next change, they don't get options in 2015, 2018, 2021. So they delay making their code changes a couple of years, so they get organized to be able to do that. If you have questions about that, you could probably talk to Christine, Prager from Sweden, and she can tell you all about what's happening with the codes. But the question is, going to that type of building from, the basic code that a lot of the majority of those are using, what changes and what do you need from a contractor to deliver? What are the key things that are different when you guys go to those levels of building, and what do you need contractors?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously specification changes, insulation, efficiency values. We have to look at always. I mean, I think builders like Thrive and like us, 2021 shows is coming, but I think a lot of us have already been building to this. I think we're kind of just finding trade contract departments that have really a workforce that understands how to design these systems and just a higher level of performance, healing and ductwork installation, some of these other items. That's kind of the challenge, because such a big population of the homes that are built in the local market are public builders, and a lot of them tend to build mostly just because the standard and most quality they're in. And so, a lot of the contractors around, especially when we're kind of starved for labor in some ways, and difficult to get contractors on the sites, having them do something that's a little bit harder, like we do, it can be difficult because they can go across the street and work for the building. And so what we found is partnering with companies who are aligned and maintaining those relationships and really working collaboratively has been a big help for us. But obviously, we're always out looking for other like-minded contractors out there to partner with everyone doing their homes.
And Bill, when you guys started working on building your first net zero homes in 2010?
Yep.
What happened in working with the contractors? I know just from working with you guys in the past, like the framing team, you have convinced the contractor to give you one crew who's trained to do your framing for air sealing. Those are the things that I remember. And then also getting to the ACH score. That seems to be the most critical. Using the blower door test, that's when the raters come in. And I don't know if Robbie Schwartz is on the line. maybe doing, but Robert's possibly going to be asking questions on that side. But so going back to just an idea of like the challenges of, I think I heard you both in the conversations before saying the level of detail you need from the contractor, and your installation contractor, because that seems to be the level of attention to detail seem to be the number one thing that you guys said that has to be bumped up with the contractor to deliver. Can you comment about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, I think both Rick and Michael touched on this, that training has become really, really important, especially since the workforce that a lot of us are going after are untrained and unskilled. We're not hiring previously trained employees. We're having to build them from scratch. And so we do a lot of work with our vendors out in the field, Patricia was alluding to, where we're putting the training on. We're partnering with manufacturers and distributors to put the training on out in the field to make sure people understand the specifications that we need as a different builder. So when you come onto a Thrive or McStain job, how is it different than stepping onto another builder's job? And I think in partnering with vendors for that, we really need partners that have a desire to innovate, that believe in preparing their crews for what's coming is a benefit to their business, and that are willing to set aside time for their people to go through this type of training. And it's not just training on specifications and go do this, but it's a training on why you do it. And I think some great examples that we've had in the past, and this is a really simple example, but just the guy that does the air sealing. You can walk into a home and see a tremendous job done with foaming and sealing and making the home airtight, but you also see it in a bunch of weird places where it's not needed. It's not part of the exterior air barrier or the envelope, but this guy knows he's supposed to go and foam holes. So he goes and foams holes everywhere. Does a great job, but he's doing twice the amount of work that he needs to do because he doesn't understand the reason behind what he's doing. And so it's really important to get into that conversation. Not only here's your spec, but here's why you're doing it. And here's the outcome that we want out of it. So that when they walk into the job, they're not doing excess work when they show up. And we do a number of trainings that Patricia was alluding to, and we really focus on that to try and get people to understand. And it's eye-opening. We did a smoke test in one of our homes where we filled the attic full of smoke and we depressurized the house. We stood on the second floor, we had drywalled the lid, and you just see smoke pouring through the top plate in one of the rooms. And it turns out that we had cut a square hole to put a round pipe in it, and then squirted a bunch of foam around it. And so it was leaking. There was, this theatrical smoke was pouring through that hole. And one of the guys goes, "Don't worry, I got it." He grabs the foam gun, he jumps up there and he squirts a bunch more foam in there. And we turn the blower on, lo and behold, it leaks again, smoke everywhere. He gets up there third time, foam, 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 foam. Turn the blower on and it leaks again. And it's just an example of, it goes back to the initial guy who cut the square hole for the round pipe. You can't fix it after that. And so getting that person in the room to see that situation and understand how he's affecting the people down the chain from him and prohibiting the performance that we're looking out of the home because of one simple thing he did. Like Rick was saying, that it can be really, it's not hard, but there's a lot of pieces to it. And having a partner with that desire to innovate, that desire to train, that willingness to put their people through it, and the willingness to help them understand why they're doing it is critically important for success in energy efficiency, healthy home building, and will be for all electric homes down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Bill just said. That's exactly what we run as well. And so the why behind the what. And I think, I know we're talking contractors here, but I think it's the same story when it comes to our on-site solutions. They're actually building the homes for it. They need to have that same mindset, and they need to be looking out for these same sort of issues and training them up as well, so that they can collaborate with their trade partners and prove their how to work. I mean, that's a big deal for us as well, because getting them bought in. I mean, they're really on the front lines and their eyes and ears as far as catching the square hole up in the gravel ceiling, or, everything's all sealed up and someone punches a hole through the rim, or, any of these sort of little mistakes that, you're just trying to get a job done easily, or you miss something, you try to go back, having boots on the ground is well, it's also something you kind of really critical. It's not hard, you just have to really pay attention, and you gotta know why, small details, right?
So what is the value for a contractor to then work with you if it takes extra work and training to understand that versus just doing code? Is there a niche, reason? Like specifically was wondering, is it if the contractors thought about what we said, more innovative and forward-thinking and positioning positioning them for the code changes that are coming. So when these happen in 2024 in Denver, they're going to net zero and electrification 100% on new builds.
It's the same reason that, our companies build the way we do. We think it's a competitive advantage to other people, the companies in the market. I think from our perspective, we have a lot of trade contractors that we've worked with for 20, 30 years. And, I've worked in purchasing at big builders, and I mean, if you're a contractor bidding those jobs, it's cutthroat. I mean, I would award a bid over $20 on a house, because that's what they're awarding based on is low to top. And so I think, if there's contractors out there that are willing to put in that work and align with builders that are like-minded like us, we tend to be more loyal to our trade because we know we can't just go out there in the market, have 5 companies bid our jobs and get the same quality of work amongst all. And go back and redo stuff, it's super expensive. And so, I think you're going to get kind of the benefit of the doubt or the last look, whatever you want to call it, when you're bidding our job, we do a relationship with you. And we've seen that your workforce is skilled and the result that we want versus some guy off the street who just started his company and thinks they sort of know what they're doing and is going to come in and cut your price. Well, I think it gives you an advantage as far as being able to plan your business out a year or 2 years in advance, because I've been McStain for the last 10 years, and I know I'm going to continue to get the best shot at their work just because of the partnership that we built. And I think that's the advantage for the kids who want to do that. At least from my perspective, versus just going out there and trying to get to the bottom dollar didn't
How can, any comments on that before asking the question?
I would just say that there's opportunity out there. I think one of the benefits of being a builder that's out ahead of code is we've been able to strategically take steps in advancement on our own. And so we've been able to do things in small steps. So for instance, when we've been building all electric now for about 1.5 years, but we've been building it as an option. So we get to go into a home, try it out on a home here and there. So we're not going out and throwing it into 100 homes all at once. We're learning on this home, we're improving on the next home, and we're not subjecting our buyers, a large number of our buyers, to some new product. We're not subjecting our vendors to really having to kind of reinvent their team and their team's education over a large scale, because we're doing it in small steps. And I think what we're going to find, at least this is my opinion, the 2021 code is tough. And there are a lot of municipalities adding tougher requirements on top of it. City and County Denver is really pushing towards all electric homes. They're not mandating it yet, it doesn't look like, but they're putting enough steps and what they're calling incentives into their code that a lot of builders are going to be choosing that just to comply with the energy code requirements. And so for those vendors that have worked with a builder like Thrive or McStain that have been on that pathway and are prepared for this, I think there's opportunity to go in and bid these jobs, win them because of your expertise. You understand the challenges associated with them. You've trained your people. You're going to be able to come in and be more cost effective when this becomes a widespread mandate through code and through different municipalities, municipality requirements, that I think it positions you in advance for success when that happens, and that's coming quickly.
Great. So the question is, if I'm the rep, or the salesperson sitting in front of you from an installation contractor, an HVAC company, and I want to try to get business, and I'm making the commitment to training, and I understand the level of detail and the design especially is where, right? How would I show that as a company to bid the work in what you're looking for in that level of detail and versus us having a list, but what are some of the things that are practices that stand out that would make you consider hiring a contractor?
Well, I think for me, it's showing me partnership, right? From the start. It's showing, you got to have the basics. You got to show that you have the bandwidth. You got to show that you've got competitive pricing. You've got to be in the ballpark. But when you realize who we are and what we're doing, your willingness, showing me your willingness to collaborate, because what we do at Thrive is we're looking for a performance outcome. And we put together specs and scopes to get there, but we're not the expert. And we realize I am not a mechanical expert. I'm not an electrical expert. And I've done my best with the training and knowledge and experience that I have to put those specifications, those product requirements into place to get to our outcome. But I need vendors that are willing to come in and sit at the table with me and go, great, I understand what you're trying to do. And I have this expertise that I've built in my team, and I'm willing to collaborate with you and help you get where you need to go. And it may be different than the pathway we're going down, but we need that exchange. We need that back and forth. We need that help and partnership to make sure we're doing it right, efficient, and in the most cost competitive manner. And we don't have that expertise in our house. You have that in your house as a vendor. And as long as you're willing to sit down at the table and spend the time and show that partnership and that engagement, that puts you at the head of the pack.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to identify, contractors that care. They want to come in and have a conversation. You send them a bid package, they're going to review the plans and review your specifications. Chances are, if they're coming to bid, Bill's job or one of mine, they know what we're about. If they come back to us with some intelligent questions or suggestions on, hey, so we got this that you put a work on somewhere else that's seems effective. What do you think of doing that? I might be able to get your price down a little bit, or might be more efficient in one way or another. You can tell pretty quickly long enough. Somebody who's bought into it versus, you put a bid package out to somebody, they just shoot you a number back over. Sometimes without even detail what that number entails, and the person's job to sort of have this conversation. Sort of well, yeah, we normally bid this at X dollars per square foot, so that's the number that we have. Here you go. It's pretty apparent at that point that the difference in expectations that company have. So that's a big thing. References are huge too. I mean, if someone comes in and tells me that they've done Thrive work, I know that and there's other builders around the state who are doing similar type of work. So, for us, references are huge. We're bringing trade on how we work for the past, what we've done. And for someone that we're seriously considering, for trade that we're considering bringing on, we can those references and try to check up on your work to see how is this company performing the best. And so, I know if you're brand new, obviously it's tough to build that track record, but if you're someone that's been around and been doing this for work, and you just want to get the credit for it, that's really how we is that as well.
Great. Any questions? Are we on time? Okay.
We are having an issue with the chat box. So if anyone has questions, there's Rob. Ask them to text me. Well, other text. Oh, okay. Can you give the number out? Okay, so my number is 303-349-6390. They can text me.
Okay.
If they
Can
have
you say
questions.
the number one more time?
303-349-6390.
We got Robbie in too.
Oh, great. Robbie, any comments from a Raiders perspective, what you see needs, or I don't know if you've been listening to the conversation or not, but
Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to kind of get your thoughts on that transition, where builders making that transition. How can a contractor be a big help for them to make that transition, or specific things contractors need to be thinking about doing the higher performance work?
Yeah, sorry for the delay getting on and the technical difficulties, but I totally agree with Rick and Bill. Well, the first thing to know is that the 2021, or really the 2012 through the 2021 IECC it has incorporated a significant amount of building science, and the performance of the homes that are just built to code I have changed significantly, and the trade partner ability to execute to just achieve code needs to improve, well as any program that might go in theory beyond code. The reality is that the primary difference between a code built house and a Energy Star house, for example, is the execution and the verification. Code officials need as much education as trade partners in order to understand what the codes are asking them and the performance that's being achieved, and they ultimately need to enforce it. So in order to actually get that performance. On the flip side, what we're seeing in Boulder County with regards to the Marshall Fire and the incentive programs that are out there that are trying to incentivize builders to build to Energy Star or DOE Zero Energy Ready Home program, is that these programs have not been utilized by custom builders for the most part. It's the regional production builders and the national production builders that are primarily used that. So they really have a long way to go to understand how to build to these programs in a cost-effective way, because the incremental cost of going from a code-built house to an Energy Star house is not that great. Again, the code is asking for all of these things, and the code officials and code jurisdictions are doing, in essence, a detrimental thing to these builders, because they aren't holding them to what the code is asking to. So when they're asked to do Energy Star, or a client comes to them to do Energy Star, for example, they're behind the eight ball when they really shouldn't be behind the eight ball. So I think really, the emphasis on education that you're talking about is key, and trying to demonstrate that the incremental steps between code and these programs isn't as great as people think they are. We just need to, do that education to help people understand that that incremental change or incremental differences.
Thanks, Robbie. It's been interesting. I've been on the committees and involved with the Marshall Fires with Robbie, and it's literally like a microcosm what's going to happen when code changes, and the builders are scrambling, the 13 that are trying to make a commitment to build to those levels. And there's a couple of builders that have decided to jump in, but it's like compressed time into, half a year. They have to make all these decisions, and some of them are saying, yeah, no problem, we can build net zero. Yeah, it won't be that much, but it'll cost you 100,000.
Yeah.
But it's not true, but they've been putting a lot of messaging out there like that. And so, how do we the counter message?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, they don't know what they don't know. But the other issue that was brought up earlier in the discussion is very true, is that the contractor labor shortage and education shortage is huge, and especially with regards to HVAC and heat pumps and other electrification issues that are specifically being incentivized for the Marshall Fire builders and homeowners. There's just a dearth of ability to actually execute. We just don't have the trade contractors that understand how a heat pump works and how it integrates with the building thermal envelope and all of those connections there. For example, I mean, that's one small example, but again, I think it ultimately comes back to training.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Do we have any, like, as far as the municipalities, so Denver, North Rock, Centennial, do those municipalities provide certification courses that these contractors can run through quickly, like a 3-day course before you hire them? Or do you think that would kind of kill business for you because it would be too expensive for you to have those builders get trained up on, for example, like air sealing, like a 2-day or 3-day course ran by the city by a professional on air sealing, and then you can have them work for you?
I'm not aware of anything provided by the cities on that front. Gosh, I mean, trade organizations, maybe Robbie's better equipped to handle that than me, but you know, there's a lot of places to get training. I just don't think the cities, as far as I know, are on top of that.
And ask your manufacturers. Your
Sure.
manufacturers provide training. I think that, you know, distributors and contractors are not using them often enough, where a distributor as a manufacturer, bring them in and do a training for multiple contractors. There's, I think, a lot of avenues. Excel does a lot of those trainings too, to tap into. And yeah.
And Colorado Energy Office as well has a significant amount of training. I think your idea isn't bad, but the training is actually a good idea, I think. But the issue is getting the contractors to actually come to the trainings. So maybe that link with the city and some type of certification, in essence, or part of their licensing or something could be a way to incentivize, in essence, participation.
And we're open to EBC. I mean, you know that we've started the efforts to bring in workforce for you and trained workforce and trainings, and we haven't done that in a while because there has been other training. So if we can come up with some innovative ideas that would enable you guys to get your workers there, maybe do it in microbursts. I mean, I have no idea, but that's something to think about. And question?
Sure. Andrea Salazar with Michael's Energy. I just wanted to know, as far as cities doing trainings, this is related more to commercial and multifamily, but I just wanted to put out there that the city will be offering trainings on how to do an electrification feasibility report. So talk to me later if you're interested in that. Just wanted to put that out there, that is a city sponsored training.
So I have my assumption with code changes has always been that everyone grumbles, but then they realize that they're gonna be required to install 2x6. So they do it. I'm hearing maybe from Robbie that maybe jurisdictions are letting things pass. And I'm wondering if maybe there's not enough detail in the code that it doesn't specify, hey, here's how we want the heat load, you know, here's how we want it certified. And are we finding that they're letting things pass? Because if you don't pass your inspection, you got to fix it, right? So if you're not installing it right, there's no motivation, like you're not going to get paid because you didn't do it right to figure it out. And once you figure it out, you're going to do it the next time. But that's not what I'm hearing, but I'm questioning whether I'm hearing that right.
Yeah, I'm not sure that your example is the best example, but in essence, the code book as written is not being adopted as written. It's getting amended. So that's the first issue. And then the second issue is enforcement and how it's interpreted, but also lack of understanding that they're, you know, not seeing that air sealing issue that Bill exemplified with the smoke test. You know, that's clearly stated in the code that all penetrations to the unventilated attic or the ventilated attic need to be sealed, but they're not necessarily looking at it at that detail. partially because they're overworked. They've got, 30 inspections, and they're not just looking at energy issues. They're looking at other issues as well. And partially because they just don't really understand the building science with regards to it. And to some extent, the code official arena is still stuck on the side of life safety and not understanding how energy codes interact with life safety issues. So they tend not to spend the time on energy code issues.
Great. So 3 takeaways, because we're going to have to wrap up and go to the next session. Thank you for coming and speaking with us. I think it's great to hear the perspective, and I'm hearing a couple of things. One, the contractor attention to detail, the execution to actually get the performance versus going, I'm just going to put the spray in. Oh, it didn't work. Why didn't it work? It's just supposed to work when I put the glue in the hole. So I think understanding what the why as well. And I know we're talking about new homes here, but it's the same skills and principles for retrofit, that we're all doing as well. And that the customer has a good experience and they get the performance and the comfort and the savings and all those things. Any other comments before we move on?
I was just gonna make a comment back to something Bill talked about early on in the embedded carbon. In January 1, 2024, for commercial builders, we'll have to meet a new embedded carbon list that's being developed by the state architect right now. But there's a second bill that passed that allows for tax credits to private developers who build to that same list. And it's being developed right now. So that's something worth taking a look at, I think, on the embedded carbon side, that's going to set more of a standard in Colorado.
And that is a perfect segue to our next speakers from BPI, Larry Zarker and John Jones. And BPI is now coming out with a decarbonization credential for raters. And so we'd like to take 5 minutes and just hear a little bit about that, just to give you a sense of the future where things are going.
I'm Larry Zarker. I'm CEO of the Building Performance Institute. I'm here with John Jones. You want to introduce yourself, John?
Yes, I'm John Jones, a BPI National Technical Director, and I actually spent quite a bit of time in Colorado a few years ago when we were the first home energy support partner with the Colorado Energy Office. So I know the state quite well.
Mm-hmm. And we're here today to talk about a project that we're doing with the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, NEEP, and it's under contract to the U.S. Department of Energy on the BPI Building Decarbonization Retrofit Specialist. It will be a certificate level exam, not a full certification. I'll just go to kind of the scope of what we're trying to accomplish here. Looking at existing homes, we have 134 million of them. There are lots of issues with these homes. As you know, I laughed out loud when Bill talked about people going around and foaming holes that didn't have any importance, but you need to use the diagnostic equipment for understanding what is going on in that home. We're looking at strategic air sealing, in the attics and the band joists and where it's important in the house. Also, optimizing the insulation in the home, optimizing the mechanical equipment, moving, if possible, toward net zero, and decarbonizing the house, in this case, cold climate air source heat pumps, but we're also looking at heat pump water heaters and moving the appliances in the home toward electrification as well. And then the skill set also includes adding solar and battery storage. So a pretty comprehensive approach to upgrading the performance of homes. And I'll turn it over to John for the actual development of the scope.
Yes, hi. And where I want to start this off with is, this is, like as Larry alluded to, this is a certificate level, not certification. And it more goes towards acting in the realm of sort of a consultant. right? And it's actually guiding people or homeowners, or in this case here, it could even be a builder. So if you're the program administrators, program implementers that have boots on the ground that are trying to work with people, trying to work with builders, trying to work with raters, trying to work with others to actually bring them into this new realm of decarbonization. And you can see that from the scope here. And I typically don't read off the slide, so I'm not going, I'm just gonna let you read it. As you can see, the scope is pretty large. And actually there's a second slide that finishes off the scope. So Larry, if you want to advance the slide to the next.
We typically don't have the scope on two slides.
Yeah,
It's pretty big.
Right. And the reason is we pulled together probably 15 to 17 subject matter experts representing a huge swath of organizations, including national labs, contractors, energy efficiency program administrators, implementers, regional energy efficiency organizations. There was raters and building analysts part of the group. And as you can see, they brought together quite a bit of scope underneath this certificate. And sometimes a certificate can align with people having knowledge of a specific concept. But this certificate, they wanted to actually gear it towards the individual and actually gave them the name of the building decarbonization retrofit specialist, instead of just saying, you know, you have a certificate of knowledge in decarbonization and electrification, right? So Larry, we advance the slide to the next. And these are the responsibilities that the group identified should fall underneath that scope. And what you don't see are the tasks and the knowledge base that's attributed to each one of these, because that would probably be close to 30 more slides. If you looked at the spreadsheet for this, it was 400 lines of responsibilities, tasks, and knowledge base. And going back to what Bill said, which was really, really important, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but aspects like embodied carbon. It's very important for an individual. It's going to be out there talking to a homeowner, talking to a contractor, talking to a rater or builder about embodied carbon and what that means in the products that they're choosing or going to be using. So that's part of the knowledge base that's underneath this. And it as you can see, it covers another quite big swath of information. But knowing that, what they didn't want to do, what the group didn't want to do, was narrow this down to fall within such a small net that would only grab like a specific segment of the market. They wanted to make this knowledge base at a level that wasn't so deep that only the most proficient and educated individuals could get this, right? So with the proper training, with the proper resources available, which is what's being created right now by the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership and Energy Futures Group that are also part of this initiative. They're pulling together a whole bunch of resources and educational materials and developing training for this. What's important though is making sure that that information and resources and training is relevant and valid, and making sure that it's something that you can use and everybody can use that's going to take us to that next level. So I guess I'll stop there and see if there are any questions, and also so we can stay on schedule.
Maybe just talk a bit about timing.
Oh yeah, so the timing. So as we're developing this out, we had to pull out all the knowledge base. And so the next steps will be to pull in additional subject matter experts to do the item writing, which will happen in the spring. We will be doing pilot testing and rounding out a cut score for the certificate. And so the potential launch is going to be for late summer, early fall of next year. So we're hoping that maybe if there's an opportunity, we can actually crunch that time frame up a little bit so that we can get it out there a little bit earlier. So, but I'll stop there and see if there's any questions about it.
Great. I have one question. At what time, as you're ramping up for next year, if someone is interested, should they contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody, especially if they want to be a subject matter expert and item writer, reach out to us, and or if you just want to be informed of when it might be, you can always ping either Larry or myself. Our emails are on the end, phone numbers, contact information is
I would
there.
say if you're interested in participating in the development, the sooner the better.
Yes.
Okay, great. I thank you so much for giving us an overview. I wanted to let everybody in our organization know this is coming, and we do have a lot of energy consultants and raters in our group. So let's read all the slides from our presenters today will be provided in a follow-up email. So you can also take a look at the detail in the scope if you'd like to. Great. Thank you so much, you guys. Appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you.
So next, the wheelhouse of the EBC, why the EBC was formed 15 years ago, was to work on rebates and what we call demand side management at Xcel Energy in PUC. And now is the time to have input, to influence. And EBC, we advocate for what our members are looking at rebates and saying, okay, what needs to be modified, existing rebates, what changes would move the market, what's not working with rebates, and then it also is what's new, other new pilots, other new products and services that would help Xcel reach their goals. And so we are going to start intervening. Well, we've started intervening, and we'll have Howard Geller, who is one of the founding members of the EBC, but he is also our expert witness and consultants who is working with us on developing testimony and witness experts and whatnot. And then also Dietz and Davis is our legal counsel, and Mark Dempsey had a presentation and give you today of what's the timing, what's happening, when do you want your proposals in. And just to add one more item to that is the EBC, we have action groups that participate in the action group is where we're developing the arguments and proposals of Howard and Dietz and Davis those forward. So if you guys would like to say more and introduce yourself, that'd be great. Let's get started.
Hi, two more slides down, please. There you go. The next docket is the 23 plan. And that's the plan that we talk about way more often at EEBC, because this is the effectuation of the strategic issues. So unlike the strategic issues cases that are generally litigated affairs with cross-examination and decision of the commission, the DSM plans are mostly settled, meaning that what's going to happen is there'll be a convening of parties, and that we will make counter proposals to what Xcel has offered, which is a 500-page document as usual that goes through each product, each DSM program level, residential, commercial, etc., down to the product level, and then down to individual measures and rebates within that product category. And so next slide, please. So in that case, we have a procedural schedule already set, and you could see that we will be filing testimony in November 21st. Many times we don't get that far. What we want to do now is, this is the docket that we're engaging members now to give us their concepts as we do each DSM plan. It's a chance for the EEBC members to essentially propose new measures, new products, or new services that can or changes to existing products and services that help you do better in the market and help Xcel reach its energy goals. And as Howard's going to talk about next, what that's key here, when just like we have faced in some years past, the utility is about 10 gigawatt hours short of their goals. So with that, I'll turn it over to Howard to go through. Can we go back to slide 5, please, for Howard? and I'll be around for any questions after Howard's done as well.
Thank you, Mark, and good morning. I'm Howard Geller, and currently a consultant to EEBC, and on board to work with Mark and all the members in terms of developing positions in these dockets and presenting them in testimony that I will be authoring in both dockets, and also participating in any settlement negotiations with Excel and the other parties. I've done this kind of work for many years. For those of you who don't know me, previously I was the executive director of SWEEP, the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. And in that capacity, I was the lead person in these dockets, the plan dockets and strategic issues dockets in the past. So I have lots of experience in this type of work, and hopefully that will be helpful to EBC as we go forward. So back to what's on the table from Excel and the strategic issues docket. As Mark noted, the docket will set targets in terms of energy savings, both electric energy savings, natural gas energy savings, and impacts from beneficial electrification for the 4-year period 2024 through 2027. The dockets also, in the past and most likely in this case, will establish budget caps on how much money is spent by the utility. The actual budgets are set in the plan dockets, not in strategic issues dockets, but we do have a debate and decision as to what the cap on the budget will be. So here's the proposed energy savings targets. First is for electric efficiency programs in the upper left. And as you can see, the utilities proposing lower targets than is currently the case. The last docket of this sort led to a target of 500 gigawatt hours of savings per year. And that applies this year and in 2023 as well. But starting in 2024, the Excel is proposing to go down to 415 gigawatt hours, and then further reductions from there down to 289 gigawatt hours. So one of the big issues in the case will be, are those numbers reasonable? A big factor here is that in the past, Excel has provided discounts in stores on LED lamps, instant incentives for customers purchasing light bulbs. And they get a big chunk of their savings from that program. Something like a quarter of the total savings is coming from that program. We now have new federal light bulb standards, and also the market has changed. You go to a big box store and it's hard to find anything except an LED lamp. So in all likelihood, that program will either phase out totally or greatly diminish. And therefore, there's a big chunk of savings that the utility has been obtaining that will no longer be part of their effort. So that needs to be taken into account as we set these targets in the future, and could be a reason for reducing the targets. But again, the question is, are they lowballing the targets, and can we make a case for higher targets and convince the commission that there should be higher targets? In fact, that is what has happened in the past. We've seen lowball targets from Excel, and interveners have made a strong case for higher targets, and the commission has set higher targets than what Excel has initially proposed in the past. The electric efficiency budget, this again is the budget cap. Those are pretty robust numbers, very similar to the current cap of around $90 million currently, and I think maybe even $93 million currently. That's not actually what the utility has spent, but that's the budget caps being proposed there. And for electric efficiency are similar to what we've seen in the past. Going down to the natural gas goals and budget, the table on the lower left. Here, Excel is proposing an expansion of energy savings targets and budgets relative to what previous targets have been, what previous achievements have been, and what previous budgets have been. So they're proposing more robust targets, and down the road we'll see expanded programs, hopefully additional measure debate levels, et cetera, for realizing these higher goals. But again, could these goals be increased even further? That'll be debated in this docket. So upper right are the beneficial electrification goals and budgets. This is the first time that beneficial electrification has been split out as a key area within the plan. Excel, as many of you know, has begun providing incentives for heat pumps and heat pump water heaters, and have seen some uptake, pretty modest so far, but some uptake. They're spending now something like $1 million per year on beneficial electrification within their HVAC programs. And as you can see, they're proposing a big ramp up, 6 million in 2024, going to 17 million in 2027, and very substantial gas savings from electrification measures. By 2027, the target is about 624,000 gigawatt hours, which is approaching the savings from the gas efficiency programs. All the gas efficiency programs combined are around 1 million decatherms per year. Currently, their gas programs are achieving about, I think, 750 to 800,000 decatherms per year. So they're hoping to ramp up electrification to get within the ballpark of what they're getting from all their gas savings programs today. And then finally, lower right are the demand response goals. Excel has a set of demand response programs for both residential, commercial, and industrial customers that promote reductions in peak demand and shifting load from peak periods to non-peak periods. And goals are set for demand response in these dockets, in this docket, as well as energy savings goals. Next slide, please. So some of the key issues that will be debated and decided on in the strategic issues dockets. Some of these I've mentioned already. Are the goals reasonable? Could they be even more robust? It's this shift away from electric savings programs towards expanded gas energy efficiency and expanded beneficial electrification reasonable? Could we potentially do all of the above in terms of expanding gas, robust ramp up in beneficial electrification, and maintain a stronger emphasis on electric savings as well? We'll be debating the wisdom of their beneficial electrification targets and budgets. We'll be addressing this issue of, are they missing opportunities? Are they lowballing goals? They would rather have the bar set lower and not higher. They work hard to meet and exceed whatever goals are set by the commission, but they're preference is to, not have challenging goals. And then, are these goals reasonable in light of other things going on in terms of state and federal policies, and in particular, the very substantial new incentives, tax credits, and eventually rebates that are coming to Colorado and to customers of Xcel via the Inflation Reduction Act. There's also within the docket a discussion and proposal as to how cost effectiveness is evaluated. Xcel is proposing some changes in that methodology. So that's an issue on the table in the docket. Another very important area in this docket, it's not just about savings goals and budget caps. A big area in this docket is the shareholder incentive mechanism that the commission approves for Xcel. Xcel is allowed to recover the cost of their programs, but they also get a potential bonus. It's not a guaranteed bonus, but they are offered the opportunity to earn a profit bonus or shareholder incentive, whatever you want to call it. And there's a formula for that that's set in this docket. And there is a formula that they're operating under today, both for electric savings programs and also for gas savings programs. And Xcel has proposed a new, more complex and potentially more generous shareholder incentive mechanism. Of course, this money doesn't fall from the sky. This is money that customers eventually pay to Xcel. These programs are paid for by customers, the cost of operating the programs, and also the incentive mechanism. Part of our electric and gas bills provides this incentive. The incentive is on the order of $20 million per year currently, and they're proposing to increase it to $30 million or even more. And so this is going to be a big issue in the docket. The design of this incentive mechanism, they're proposing to now include an element in the mechanism based on the total avoided carbon dioxide emissions from all their programs combined, as well as an element related to energy savings achievement. So we'll be getting into that issue in the docket. They're also proposing some changes to the programs that would be implemented in the future to serve low-income, qualified households. So there's a new approach and a proposed increased emphasis on serving these customers. Basically, currently the qualification to participate in their income qualified programs is based on a household by household income evaluation. And Xcel is proposing to shift to a neighborhood-based program where certain neighborhoods are qualified, and any household in that neighborhood, low income or moderate income, would be eligible to participate. So potentially opening up their generous income qualified programs where in many cases they're providing 100% of the costs of weatherization and other measures, opening that up to a much larger number of households. All right, let me move on and do a similar run through on key issues in the 23 plan docket. So I believe this starts with slide 9. If you could go down to slide 9, please. First, just what Xcel has proposed in terms of budget and savings targets. In the docket, the total spend here for electric efficiency, demand response, gas programs. Here, beneficial electrification is still included within the energy efficiency programs. This isn't ignoring beneficial electrification, but it's a modest amount of money within the current programs. So $140 million total, most of that, about $117 million for electric efficiency and demand response, and about $23.5 million for gas efficiency. These are the proposed budgets. One issue here is that in recent years, Xcel has gotten approved budgets, but then spent way below the approved budget. In 2021, they spent $76 million on electric efficiency programs. They had an approved budget of $90 million. So they've been underspending their budget. And an issue I think we want to bring up in this docket are there ways to design the plan so that Xcel is prodded to come closer to spending their full budget? On the savings side, the electric savings target is 491 million kilowatt hours per year. We use gigawatt hours, 491 gigawatt hours per year. And remember, the target for this year and for next year as well comes out of the last strategic issues docket. That's 500 gigawatt hours per year. So they put forward a plan that does not quite achieve the target that they're supposed to be attempting to achieve. And so clearly we'll be working on, are there ways to enhance the plan to, at least on paper, demonstrate that the plan could achieve at least 500 gigawatt hours per year. They've opened the door for us to come in with suggestions for additional initiatives or enhanced programs to get them over the target that they're supposed to be reaching. And here on the gas side, they are currently ramping up their gas programs. This isn't just waiting until 2024. In 2021, they achieved 812,000 decatherms of savings from their gas programs, which was higher than what they achieved in previous years. And for 2023, they're proposing to ramp it up to about 874,000 decatherms per year. So there's ongoing growth in the gas efficiency efforts and achievements of the utility. And then the next slide, please. Key issues. Can we enhance what they're going to do next year to get to at least 500 gigawatt hours per year? Within the plan, there's still pretty modest participation targets for beneficial electrification, heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. They have increased incentive levels to around $1,500 to $2,000 per heat pump. And that, along with the IRA incentives that are coming, the federal incentives, should they be pushing for, much higher number of heat pumps and heat pump water heaters passing through their program. And then an issue in this docket, as well as in strategic issues, is what to do with their mass market LED incentive program, the in-store buy-down program that, there's discounts on LED lamps in Home Depot and Lowe's and Walmart, in hardware stores, et cetera. And the new federal standards kick in 2023, and should, Xcel continue this mass market program in 2023. So that will certainly be an issue and a big issue in the docket. In the area of demand response, Xcel is in the process of installing smart meters for all of their customers, residential, commercial, industrial. And as they roll out these advanced meters, they're shifting customers over to time of use rates. In light of these improved meters, is there more that the utility could be doing in the area of demand response? Begin to take advantage of the capabilities of these meters, potentially additional pilot programs next year that will give them a running start on expanded demand response in 2024. That's an area of focus in the docket. And then last but not least, are there more opportunities for what we call midstream incentives that are paid to distributors, to retailers, going up the supply chain and influencing stocking decisions and increasing the impact potentially through a combination of incentives for distributors and contractors and incentives for the customer. Xcel has done this already with some commercial LED lighting products. They've also done this with commercial rooftop packaged air conditioning equipment. It's been very successful in growing the impact of the program, growing the number of qualifying units that are sold. And so could this be applied also to, say, residential heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, additional lighting products, etc.? Okay, let me stop there, and we can open this up to questions for Mark or myself.
Could we go to the last slide also, which has our contact information? We're very much in the middle of this now, and now is the time when we need some direct engagement from EEBC members, because we expect any day now to start the settlement discussions, and we need to be prepared. And in the past, what has been successful for companies, members who have these ideas, is to work with Howard, myself, Patricia, to put together proposals at the level of quality and detail that Xcel needs to do a quick evaluation, because they're about to get flooded with a bunch of comments, proposals, settlements, ideas. And in order for us to be effective, we need to show them that we come at this from a perspective that they do, that shares their focus on goals, budgets, implementation. And for that, we have to lean on your company BD teams, as well as your if you have them, regulatory folks. And you can reach out to us or Patricia or the number of committees that EEBC has going to discuss this, some of which we've given the relevant sections of the plan to already.
Any questions?
I have a super high-level question that I've always been curious about. We always talk about benchmarking carbon reduction 80% of 2005 levels by 2030. How does that actually affect the real number? Like if we say 80%, but it's only 2005 numbers, are we actually only meeting 50% total reduction of the system? Because I think it kind of hides something there, and I'm not sure what it is. And I'm sure there's a reason they had benchmarked it to something, but why not just say total reductions? 80% total. Why 80% from 2005?
Well, if I can jump in and try to respond, the 80% reduction from the actual level in 2005 gives them a cap. That's the hard number that they have to stay within. And they also file resource plans with the commission, and they filed a plan already to demonstrate how they're going to reach the cap on emissions in 2030. And what it proposes is that for the total amount of electricity, kilowatt hours of generation that they're providing to serve the electric demand of their customers in 2030, 80% will be coming from wind and solar, 80% of the electric generation from wind and solar, 16% from natural gas, and only 4% from coal-fired power plants. Of course, this was a utility that was, 70, 80% coal generation 20, 30 years ago. So that gives you an idea of, what the generation mix in the electric supply will be looking like in 2030 as a result of this policy.
And also there is a goal in the statute that says there'll be 100% reduction by 2040 as a sort of aspirational target. There's not a regulatory requirement around that as yet, but you could see that that's where it's going. That certainly, if with it by all the coals off the system by the end of this decade, and the natural gas that's there will increasingly just be, it's used to plug holes. It's not something that's constantly firing, at least that's the goal. And then although you might have capacity that is natural gas fired fossil fuel as a percentage of energy that's actually coming out of that plant, that would increasingly go down.
And let me also note that the cap on emissions is something they have to live with in the context of growing electrification, both heat pumps and electrification in buildings, and also electric vehicles. That's adding new electric load. And by 2030, significant load, and by 2040, very significant new load. And they don't get, extra emissions every time somebody puts in a heat pump or buys an EV. So that's a factor here that we have emissions, carbon dioxide emissions caps in the context of what's hopefully going to be very significant electrification. And it also, the changing electric supply mix means that this whole area of demand management and demand response is just going to be even more important in the future, because most of the generation, of course, is not baseload generation. It's generation when the wind's blowing and when the sun is shining, and generation cuts back as weather conditions change, and the utility is going to need to have strategies for balancing supply and demand in a world where the large majority of the generation is this variable renewable based generation.
Thanks, and I'm gonna cut that off really quick as we're getting close on time. Thank you both for talking through that, because rebates are complex and we don't realize that all of that's going on at that higher level to create the rebates that you guys use in the field. And so you can see that's part of why we have this team who's working on that. But then the piece that Mark was talking about that we need from you is to dig into your part of the policy, look at your industry section and say, okay, what level are the rebates at right now based on what's happening in the market and what we see, Excel's goals are, what is reasonable and what is needed to move the market for you to be able to use those rebates. And so we're asking you, so I put a little recap in here of, the plan that they're just talking through. Both of those plans are 500 pages long. And I don't think you want to try to open it up and even try to find your industry section. So what they did for us is went through and identified the HVAC lighting, the areas in the plan that are interest to our industry groups. This will be in our follow-up. You'll be able to actually pull up the link to the full plan and go to those sections and take a look at it. And then the action groups, if you go to the next slide. But the action groups is where you break it down, and like that kind of question, Bill, that you have, I think probably more you're looking for specifically too. And so understanding the big concepts, you don't necessarily have to understand that, but I think a key thing that we all need to be looking at is Excel setting the goals high enough, number one, which is, you know, what they both, what Howard and Mark talked about. And what will it take for you to deliver with those rebates? So the question that I have when he was going through, here are all the issues to discuss, is for, if we're talking about workforce and training to be able to hit the performance goals as the metrics going forward, how much needs to be, how high does Excel need to make those large budgets to ensure that there's workforce development in there and training, and also helping find workforce? Like, can we ask Excel to do that? Sure can. Like, we can put forward whatever proposals we want. Then he break it down into specifically insulation and air sealing. Is that Owens Corning has proposed last year, and it didn't get accepted, to create a new attic insulation, increase the visibility for attic insulation. And I think R19 increments at a time. It's not worth it rolling a truck, you know, at less than R19. So it's like looking at your specific rebates, and then how can your industry's equipment and services fit into demand response and those beneficial electrification budgets that are going to be coming out. So those are the specifics that when you get into the action group that we're going to be breaking down, and your proposals for those changes are going to be due mid-October. So we have to work now to put those proposals together, because you have to put the data in, and then we have the team to package it up and take it to Excel and help us negotiate. I don't know, that rebates are not just born, like they're made. We make them and you have influence, versus just waiting till you get the plan and go, well, this doesn't work, the paperwork doesn't work, I gotta fix, there's any more transparency. When they decline, like in lighting, they talk about when they decline their the rebate that they had proposed, they are like, we need feedback why it was declined so we can change what we're doing. You can get that, break it down to that front line that you guys need. Is that helpful to understand what it takes to change a rebate? It's a lot. And that's why, so a couple things here I included so we can, I know we're on time. Back on the table where Ryan's sitting back there, couple things. To participate in the action groups, definitely be a member of the EBC, have your input. We are the business voice, and Excel respects getting feedback from us because they trust our businesses. And I'm saying more than environmentalist groups or whatnot, that there are a lot of companies intervening in this process. So there is an overview on what we call intervening to change rebates. So if you want to grab one of those and get involved with the action groups. Quarterly membership meeting, December 15th, the same date. Topics we're looking at breaking into two parts, talking about the federal incentives and having our energy office and talking about how they are planning on rolling the rebates into the marketplace and what their priorities are, and how that's going to interplay with our existing incentives in the state now, municipalities and cities. And then this second part, we'll be talking about where we're at again on intervening. So definitely sign up for that. That link is available. We'll come to you in the thank you as well. Good green jobs, we talked about that earlier. Please give your name to Ryan, your contact information, and get you involved. They're rolling out the first modules and the training here at the end of October. So you should have new hires available in November. And a couple other things, we have active awesome members, and so we wanted us to announce that the Metro Denver Green Homes Tour, Saturday, October 1st, self-guided tour, $10 for adults, that's back there, as well as the Rocky Mountain Building Maintenance and Engineering Expo. which is on October 4th. And then also, some of you may have been watching the Heart of a Building. And it's like showcasing buildings of tomorrow, we do it today. It's a people show. So if you want to make announcements about upcoming things, let us know, and we always include those in our news you can use. Official Electrification League is a group of utilities and cities, and EDC is a board member in that, and SWEEP as well. And that event is going to be highlighting electrification. We're going to have builders talking about business cases that they have for their homes going electric, what that takes and what's happening in the state. And then also they're going to have a speakers panel, kind of similar to today, but we're focusing on contractor perspective and thinking more on why go electric. And you can sign up for that. We'll have that link in the link as well. But you can sign up for that on the loveelectric.org.
On the first, in conjunction with the Green Homes Tour at the Net Zero store in Golden, we're going to have an electric vehicle showcase. So Rivians, Lightnings, every electrical vehicle, hopefully about 30 different vehicles. And also talking about what Helio does with being a one-stop shop for electrification of existing homes. So that's that afternoon, and it's right at the Net Zero store. And I'll get you a little bit more information for it if people want to come by.